mics to pick up me chewing.
No, we're good. We're good. They're close.
All right. Welcome to by Thoughtworks. This is our first hybrid event, so bear with us if anything goes wrong and you suddenly go offline. Just refresh and log back in, but hopefully we can get through all of this. For those of you that are dialing in from home, feel free to add questions in the chat and I will read them out at the end. Of course, if you're in the room, just shout out and I'll try and relay them so people at home can hear those. The talk today is called Lost in Translation, Bridging the Business and Tech Divide. So hopefully there's something in that for all of you to learn and hear the stories. I heard the trial run earlier today and it was pretty good. So I think you're in for a treat. If we flick to the next slide, I'll just start by doing the acknowledgement to country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we work. We acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the country and the land on which we are hosting this event today. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to all First Nations people present today. So some introductions. So next to me is Sarah. Many of you have met Sarah before. And Sarah's secret skill is actually bridging the gap between the business needs and finding those technical solutions. So Sarah works with CTOs and technology leaders to help them develop and discover what they need to do to accelerate their businesses. And she works with everything from the assessment process right through to implementing those strategies with a keen focus on maximising business value. Next is Mara. Mara has 20 plus years of experience as a futurist in growth strategy and a business leader, sitting at the intersection of business and technology again. And her secret weapon is identifying the business value in ideas and helping to align them with the business strategy. And last but not least is Nigel. Everyone knows Nigel. He is a passionate, lean and agile technology leader with over 30 years experience, covering everything from government, multinationals and startups. He is our local social scientist, which is probably one of the best titles I think going around at Thoughtworks. And his job is to equip organisations with the tools and thinking they need to accelerate them to become a modern digital business. So I'll hand it over to the team.
Very kind. We kind of got one of each of us, didn't we? We got tech and product and the rest.
Perfect. So today we're talking about Lost in Translation, and in the title, Bridging the Business and IT Divide. And we've done the controversial thing here. We've put business and IT as separate, and that's part of the challenge we really want to talk to today, and really start to think about how can we actually work together towards a common goal, which actually sees BizTech together as one view.
It's a familiar picture for me, having, well, they said 30, but it's getting near to 40. And it's what basically my career path looks like has been this constant Mario game, battling my way up to finally get to the top and in front of an executive who are a boss battle with at least a gorilla of that size at some point. But the good news is we don't need to do the talk today because I've actually solved it. I've figured it out, used my social science powers. All you have to do to resolve all this underlying conflict and dissonance is just have the Chief Product, Technology, Marketing, Sales and Finance Officer as a role in your company.
Amazing.
Do you think that solves it, or do we need to go on?
I like it.
I don't think it solves it.
Someone who can do everything in breadth and depth.
Yeah.
So talking about the boss, and different versions of crime scenes. I'm sure we've all got our own version of this. One thing that I was recalling in preparation for this was trying to solve for a customer problem, and that customer problem was that they would log online, they would make a purchase, and there was a promise of a reward post that purchase. An immediate reward, but that reward would often not be realised until, or received for about 48 hours because of what was happening in the back end. So you can imagine the customers were very unhappy. The customers also jumped onto the App Store and provided really terrible reviews that impacted our overall brand and the trust in the brand. So there was really recognition from the organisation that it needed to be fixed. So the product team and business team went off and created a business case and had it funded to the tune of just over $1 million. And we had so much documentation. We were so certain that we knew exactly what to do to fix it until we got halfway through the initiative and realised that it's not going to be real time. All the things that we promised, actually we can't deliver with this existing budget. We need to go back and we need to ask for another $500,000. So
at this point, there's 75 people in the audience going, why is she talking about my business experience?
And just the courage that it took to go back to the executives and explain what might have gone wrong and how could we have been so confident and then have lost so much confidence through the build. So that was one version of a crime scene, which was not fun to deal with. We did get the funding, were able to progress, but at that point in time, we had business and technology pointing to each other, saying it's your fault. Like you didn't understand my needs well enough, and technology is saying no, you didn't explain it. So how could I have possibly built the right thing?
You built what you told us to build.
Right.
What's the problem?
Yeah. So it was literally this.
How much did it cost them?
1.5 in the end.
I can. I'll see your 1.5, and I'll raise you 825 million USD.
You win.
Now, luckily, thankfully, not my story, not the Thoughtworks story, but who remembers 10 days before the end of last year, Southwest Airlines ground to a halt. I'll tell you, 16,700 flights were cancelled, holiday plans disrupted, all because their legacy IT systems ground to a halt, thanks to weather and a couple of other scenarios that happened. Their systems melted down, and it cost them $825 million. Half of that was revenue loss alone. The other half was building back their reputation, rebooking people on flights, rebooking the people with accommodation, with housing, paying their employees overtime to work. It's not cheap, the consequences of these actions. And the reason why the system failed is that fundamentally a lack of investment, so an underinvestment in their IT systems. How many CTOs here have been challenged by their executive team about the need to improve their systems, to replace their systems? They're working well, okay, they're fine. We don't have the investment that's needed to upgrade from your aging mainframe technologies into some super smart, snazzy technology just because you think tech has once been new and shiny. Well, I'm going to challenge that because at the time when that investment to the technology systems should have happened, they spent $2 billion on aircraft, on maintaining other parts of their customer experience. That underinvestment cost them $825 million. Now, I hope we don't have to see that again in your organisations, but just that continual lack of investment into the technology systems. But it's more than that, because it's more so a technology leader trying to knock on the door of the board to explain why they need to invest in the systems and what risk really lies about in them, and the lack of being able to get through to the problem at hand.
And do the obvious thing, in America, you fire the CTO.
Right.
I don't know if they did, but look, it's on record the number of times they took a business case to the executive to try and get investment in their debt. Oh, it'll never happen. The perfect storm of booking systems with crew booking systems with weather, never going to happen. So, we need to move on. Hello, that's a little bit tricky. We'll get our handy technical studio assistant to put the slideshow back so we can keep up with ourselves, because...
Now, the problem is that we've got these aging systems, but we are accelerating towards our customer value.
Actually got a photo of the Southwest Airlines architecture here.
We keep on compounding the complexity of our systems. We keep on building up more and more scale. We want the new and shiny experience. We want the innovation. and we keep on just adding to the problem. We don't go in and fundamentally fix the problem. What we do is we put a big black box around our wires there.
It's middleware.
And then get surprised when we send an engineer to go fix that, and they get fried or at best turn away from the problem.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because, you know, we talk about tech debt, but actually it's business liability, right? And so just to shift that conversation and use a slightly different language and to be able to explain why that, which everyone can see is a mess, is a business liability, is actually really what we're talking about today.
But you just add ChatGPT, surely. That'll
Surely.
solve it. It'll all work perfectly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to some extent, from my perspective, you know, as a social scientist, this is the core of the problem.
Yep. Yeah, language, all we have is language, right? And so there's, in the way we speak or in the way we write, again, going back to the first opening, which was we had so much documentation, there were so many meetings around this one experience that I described. But how did it go so wrong? When we're actually using the same forms of communication, there's so much that sits behind this.
So language and language theory, fascinating space. There's at least 12 different models of how the whole concept of a language, and it's at least 200,000 years old. It's as argued about as JavaScript frameworks and the history of technology, but let's say 150,000 years of practice, and it enabled our species to get the advances we did, because we could share things like planning, which become incredibly relevant to complex journeys and ultimately building complex IT systems. But it also gives us this very dangerous superpower called the capacity to create a shared delusion. So shared delusions are a uniquely human element that we create, and we've got some very large institutional delusions like the Vatican Church, the US dollar, but right down at our own internal lives, we can create, then they're called strategies or OKRs. And we're using exactly the same brain components and premises to construct those things in the air. And it's a massive constraint, and it's had huge consequences. So the study of language and its shortcomings, an American, Edward Tufte, I was in the States in 2003 when the Columbia crashed, and there was some recriminations over, oh, it was the engineer's fault. Clearly it's the engineer's fault. Well, actually not, it's the astronaut. The astronauts were pleading to be able to do a spacewalk because a piece of foam coolant protection had hit a tile on the thing. Oh no, that'll cost a lot of money. The chief financial officer chips in at the meeting. They brought in Tufte, who's a design and, like, your sort of trade, really, design and product thinker, and he said, you know what the problem is here, is that a group of engineers attempted to explain a complex concept within the NASA PowerPoint rules. 6 bullet points, 6 words per bullet point. And it was way more complex than that, and on that basis, intelligent decision makers didn't accept the business case to proceed with a spacewalk. They'd have found the tile, and that thing wouldn't have blown up.
And that talks so beautifully to this, right, where, you know, this is the first time in history that the people who are making sausages in the factory aren't able to, or actually I should say, the people who run the sausage factory don't understand how the sausages are made. And so how can we really get to a point where these crises are averted?
It's really, and that's kind of just an embarrassing modernism, is that 100 years ago, Henry Ford knew how to make a car. And even 150, 200 years ago, you know, Arkwright, Spinning Jenny, knew how to weave cloth and run a steam engine. And today, it's impossible for people to know. And as much as I've spent a lot of my career wishing people, CFOs and heads of sales, would lean into the ones and zeros and risks associated with code, they're not going to. It's just not possible.
I think the other thing we spoke about here as well just earlier was that, you know, before you could actually walk onto the shop, onto the factory floor, you could see it, but the ones and zeros are invisible. So when you can't see it, how can you understand it? So it makes it more complex.
Yeah. So another human dimension to our problems is just the embarrassment. I mean, I was feeling it in here when you're talking about those 2 case studies of the waste, and we've all got one. We've all got that. Ooh, I don't even think I dare say it. Sort of that embarrassment, that emotional element is creating an even bigger gap between all of us who are making decisions. Because if it just go away, it would be fine. And you know, a certain very large software company that took 8 days to confess to their users that no, their cloud-based services weren't actually working properly, and it wouldn't be fixed in an hour. That's human behaviour. That's core kind of, no, don't tell them until we've got a fix type of stuff. And as intelligent folk, we dig ourselves those holes. And the moment you get security involved in this conversation, whether, you know, Medibank, Optus or otherwise, the stakes are up here, and that kind of psychological protection of self, let alone how could the executives at Medibank have known the nuances of the technical issues in that case.
And then when you get to the crisis that they have to deal with, suddenly they have to front media. They have to, you know, you have to explain to everyone what's happened. The explanations don't seem to match, especially, you know, from us in the tech world, and because there has not been a history within the organisation of actually understanding what is going on and being able to explain it. So when the CEO has to front the media, he or she has to rely on a watered down version of what the problem is, because there's none of that shared history and that shared build up of really understanding the technical issues that had led to that moment.
And every time we end up on those crime scenes, this is 7 magic words. I knew that was going to happen. You go, wow, how did we get here? Like, how did we end up here?
Well, how did we get here? Nigel, let me take you back to a time when you went to school, if you remember that.
That is many decades ago.
We all went to school. Who had cliques in their school? Who had the sporty people, the musicians, the nerds, the outcasts, the people who were into the goth music, or the people who were the social, you know, outcasts from every single group. We all had cliques. We all had these tribes, and we all talked our same language. We had common interests. We started to build up our own shorthand. So even way back in our school day, we were forming these subgroups and this sense of belonging in and amongst a bigger organisation.
It's tricky because they each have their own languages then. Like by 7, children are starting to form into these, and it's partly their parental reflections, their families, all those kind of things. Like, I could have told you by 7 I had a nerd in the family, you know, and, you know, now 21 and a huge nerd. Probably made him, to be fair, and he can claim all the costs of therapy from us accordingly. But language, rituals, the totems, the shared stories of those tribes become really important. You know, every profession has them, and to achieve to a level where, you know, you're operating in a modern Australian organisation, you've doubled down on being a lawyer, an accountant, or someone who's a professional salesperson accordingly.
And you were talking, you know, language being, you know, going years and years back. Well, that's where these tribes and cliques started to form, that sense of belonging. It's an ingrained part of human DNA that want the sense to build a community, build a sense of belonging. Mm-hmm. But the trouble in organisations is that we aren't living in a cave where we have to have that as our sole mechanism to survive. Our tribe actually needs to be wider and bigger than that. I remember a pivotal point in my career when I was a young engineer on a project. We had a problem with a story that we were working on, and I gave our BA a really smart and a really technical explanation as to the problem that we were looking at and the problem that we were trying to solve. She stared blankly at me and said, "Sarah, I'm pretty sure that you understand what you're saying, and I'm pretty sure that what you're telling me is important. I don't understand it, and I need you to explain this to me in a different way so that I, as a business analyst, can understand it and that I can go explain it to somebody else." That was my light bulb moment, and that was a singular moment in time when it changed the course of my history. Because from then on, from that project, I sought her out and I said, this is what I'm trying to say, do you understand, not do you understand that, but have I explained it in a way that you could understand it? I grabbed analogies, I grabbed metaphors. If you hear me talking in a client site, I will butcher them. But the point is that from that moment and from that, working with her on that project, I learned how to speak business speak. So I got to a stage in my career that I started to, I blurted out technology for once in a conversation with someone. And she looked at me and said, oh, I didn't know you knew tech. Like, of course, because every conversation that we needed to have was around the business, was around risk, and was around the delivery that we were doing. All of the technical stuff I've translated. I've come to the table in a way that we can bridge that divide between us.
Or we just hire people like Mara. So do you feel in the middle of that
Yeah,
kind
like
of divide?
literally physically and definitely. I mean, I think I was telling you a story the other day that, you know, in one of my previous lives, I put myself and sat as part of the business, went and sat with the engineering team. So I dressed entirely differently. I looked entirely different. It was uncomfortable for everyone. It was uncomfortable for the engineers. Like,
I'm
what is she
resembling
doing?
that remark, by the way, having dressed exactly as my engineering colleague there.
But it was also uncomfortable for my leaders. Well, like, what is she doing sitting over there? Is she doing work? And so it was uncomfortable for everyone. But that moment was really pivotal in my role, and to be able to create that success and to be able to take business cases to the board that actually could be executed. So an executable strategy, that was really pivotal. And, you know, where at the beginning it was, you know, ice and fire, it was really a really great working relationship with those teams. Where we could challenge each other. You know, it wasn't about agreeing, it was really about challenging each other's point of views, really trying to get to the core of the beliefs, the core of why we're trying to do something, and really pivotal. Just one thing to add, you know, you talk about your light bulb moment. I remember being an exec in a business and rolling out OKRs and promising the business that we're going to deliver these outcomes, and then I'd have one-on-one meetings with the engineers before and after. And a graduate engineer said to me, very, very brave of her, I had no idea the value of the work that I do, how it contributes to that financial increase in revenue. I've got no idea. Can you please explain that to me? And that was my light bulb moment. How do I actually connect these engineering metrics back to a high-level outcome that's relevant to the board? How do we connect those two things so that we all feel like we're part of the same group?
Which is a great human truth coming from someone on the lowest rung of the tribe is actually interested. Yeah. And often we don't think that. And there's some science behind this, by the way. More weird science for you. We promised you'd have something to take away, so you'll learn some big words today. And the credit for this one is it goes to IBM. So IBM, we kind of diss them a bit in this modern day and age, a bit of a, oh, that was your granddad's IT company. We owe them almost everything we have in terms of technology. So, and they used to employ social scientists in the 60s, 70s, 80s to figure out why projects were going wrong all the time. So this is not a new problem we're facing. And this particular scientist, named Hofstadter, was employed to figure out why, across their 250,000 staff, projects that involved two countries particularly would go wrong. And if India and America were involved in a project, there was a huge probability of that failing. Australia and China, huge probability of that failing. And as a social scientist and anthropologist, he dug into what was going on and developed a thing called the Hofstadter power distance ratio, which has been used in research a lot since, particularly around airlines, because the power distance between a pilot and co-pilot on Korean Air is so bad that the co-pilot would prefer to die than tell the pilot that he's forgotten to put the flaps down. You were saying they're trying to get over that now.
Yeah, well, what I've understood, and I'm trying to do the research to try and find where
do your own research.
Did I read this? But what I've understood from the research that has gone into the power dynamics and the looking at plane disasters Now certain airlines, or it might be across all airlines, have certain rules about how pilots and co-pilots are allowed to act outside of the plane. So when they go back to the hotel and it's not what you think. I'm not talking about. Come on, people. The pilot has to be subservient to the co-pilot, so they are not allowed to have the co-pilot pay for the meals, or they're not allowed to have the co-pilot have any of the cultural norms in these power distance cultures. And so they're trying to bake it into their policies and the procedures to overcome this power distance effect.
Yeah, so now as a New Zealander, I'm in the bottom left-hand corner of this about my personal level of ego and my willingness to be told by any staff who work for me that I'm an idiot and I've got it wrong. I actually expect that capability. Americans and Australians also down that bottom left-hand corner. Top right, you've got cultures where that is just not going to happen, where they're not going to say that we're doing this the wrong way, there's a security risk or otherwise. And when you combine the two, that's the distance, that's the sort of the meta distance problem that they have.
And it's fascinating thinking about how multicultural we say our organisations are, and yet when we're in the boardroom we expect a certain cultural norm to happen which is influenced by the culture that we're actually living in on the outside.
Yep. So since all good things came out of the 1960s, myself excluded, let's go to another theorist from this time, which is a fellow called Edgar Schein. Now, that's not Edgar, that's Amy Edmondson, who late in 1999, her thesis work, which led to that book, Fearless Organizations, rediscovered his work around psychological safety. And that's effectively what the airline pilots were needing to create. It just wasn't safe to say that's wrong or otherwise. Now, if you take nothing else away from today, it's Amy's recipe for psychological safety, which involves an acceptance that what you are in is a complex, adaptive network of stuff like the power pole with all the wires, and that you don't know all the answers. And what one of the things Thoughtworks observes is there's a very knowing culture in Australia. I'll put it in plain language. There is a real status to those who know. And you feel the pressure when you step up to know the answers to stuff. That's where the stage goes. And if you're put in front of a board of directors or an executive to argue your case about your product, for example, you better know. Yes. And saying I don't know is a very difficult thing to do. Now, what the books and the reading is, this is not a nicey nice culture that you have. That's the opposite of a psychologically safe culture. And that is probably one of the secret weapons to undoing this gap we have in understanding and interest. Because let's just face reality. I'm not going back to university to study engineering. I failed the first time. No use going back at 60 to try another go.
Right, and looking at that, that top bullet point there about common goal. Like there's alignment and there's alignment, right? And what most of teams
we're awesome at faking it.
is surface level alignment. Say yes in a meeting and go off and do your own agenda. Say yes, we're all working to this common purpose, but I'm going to take these words and apply them to what I want to have happen. And look, it rolls up. You have your OKRs, I have my OKRs, and then we'll go off and they don't come together. What we're talking about here is deep alignment, trusted alignment. It's not the surface level alignment where we haven't actually challenged each other and come out with a better outcome. It's a surface level niceness that actually on the surface looks like alignment and underneath is actually still misalignment and pointing off in completely different directions.
So much money is wasted in modern business around this. So it's good though, because we've solved it now. 20 years of technology havoc. It can't get any worse. We can't get any more JavaScript frameworks. We're all good. It's solved, right?
Well, sure, you solved it for maybe tech, but data is the next thing that's coming up.
The new kid on the block.
So, what are we going to do? Are we going to repeat this pattern time and time again, or are we going to learn? Are we going to apply the same thing that we've done with data and the data dashboards that we're seeing a resurgence again?
Of course.
We must have analytics. Must have analytics.
Just have to put all of the data all in one place so I can access it all. There was a really great example we were talking the other night. The best way that I thought about using data for decision making. We often hear data-driven decision making, but actually we need to put the decision at the front of what we need the data. Like, what decision are we trying to make? And the example that we were talking about the other day was a guy, and it was late at night, and he's lost his keys, and he's looking there's a spotlight on the ground, and he's looking furiously within this spotlight on the ground. Can't see his keys, but that's the only area he's looking at. Someone comes up to him and says, have you lost your keys? Have you lost them? He's like, yeah, I've lost my keys on the way from the pub. Okay, did you lose them here? No, I lost them somewhere back there, but there's the light right here. And so we find ourselves doing that with the data. There's one data point that actually makes it easy for us to have a look around, whereas actually we need to think about all the different steps along the journey that led us here, and then think about what actually might happen through that journey to make the right decision. And so data in itself is definitely important, but understanding the end-to-end sort of value chain or experience.
And you say it's the next generation of ridiculously overrated spending, but I've been doing this problem for 30 years. I worked at AXA here in Melbourne, just down the road in 1997, and we were building data warehouses to reconcile all of the different customers. We wanted a single view of customer back at the time, and we'd build these giant things that deduped Nigel Dalton from 12 Maple Avenue. Oh, it's the same one, or is it his son, or whatever. Just so much technology effort gone into that, and we got to the end and goes, okay, what do you want to ask it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And why do you need single view of customer? Like, why do you need to know every single part of that journey to optimize one component that drives the outcome? There's so much risk associated with that, all the data that's associated with collecting one person's behaviour patterns all the way through that. There's so many issues with that, yeah.
I think there's probably people in this room and on call whose lives are basically devoted to attempting to create that thing without anyone having a question they would ask of the data to do so. So we're in danger of doing this all over again, even if we haven't solved the other wiring problem, right?
Huge cost issue, huge privacy issue, no outcomes.
I wouldn't even want to ask how many hands go up if we said who's had a data business case built in the last period of time. No, well, we're kind of in that business, so if you need one done, give us a call on 1-800-Thoughtworks. But so let's do some more science, and it's kind of my science. Sorry, it's the hand wavy science, not the actual proper science. None of these experiments are repeatable. And this is partly my hero Edgar Schein, and it's partly other psychologists going, what is it about human behaviour that causes us to get into this business versus IT place? And it is, and the problem starts with a binary relationship between two humans. Now, in a molecule, it's perfectly happy to have, two blue atoms in a molecule. That'll be balanced and perfect. If that's two humans, there is a dynamic you cannot escape unless you deliberately try to break it, which is one-upping. Two people, and it could be two groups of people as well, brought together, the first thing they will do is spot the differences between them and assign a value to the difference. And you add in all of those cultural elements and rank and status and language of your weird IT language with all your special fancy words and technical debt and this kind of thing that I'm excluded from that tribe by. And this is a messy situation, and this is why most business cases tend to end up as you versus them, that kind of thing. Now, the theorists say this is very simple. This is fundamental conflict resolution psychology. Is you stop the one-to-one and you add a third atom into the molecule. And that is your objective, that is your goal, that is what you might align around. And it might not be, it's not a person, it's more likely to be a thing. Have you ever seen that dynamic on a project or a team?
Definitely, even just earlier when I was talking about sitting in that team and trying to get a common outcome and trying to understand what the goals are and document them in a way which we all really believe, all really understand, I can explain the technology as well as they can explain the business. I think that takes courage, and it takes a group to really understand that when I challenge something that might not be common, I'm not challenging you personally. I want to understand the technology. I want to understand what it is that you're trying to do. So, yeah.
It actually reminds me of a picture where you've got two people pointing at each other and they're in conflict. But then you move to this other world where they're standing in front of a piece of paper, looking at the problem together, side by side, trying to explore the problem. They've taken out the personal conflict from it and are really just trying to work out the problem that's in front of them. But that standing side by side is so body and the nature of the body is so woven into the language that we use. It's not just the words, it's the physicality of the communication. And so just standing side by side, looking at a problem with the same perspective is so crucial to that, building that first step towards the shared language.
The acid test is always parenting. So trying to not one-up your teenager, you need to have a lot of zen and wine to do that, to stand side by side with a teenager and look at the thing, the problem, the situation in front of them. But that's my wise counsel to you, is attempt to do that. Now that is, like all shared delusions, a very big underrepresentation of an organisation, because there's not two white molecules at all. And the answer isn't, we'll just smush that all together and call it the Chief Product Technology Marketing Sales and IT Officer. It is reconciling the other atoms that are in that molecule and their opinions as well, and understanding the relationships between those things. And I know it's the classic social scientist, it's complicated, is that answer. But we've built those situations and we need tools to manage within those kind of complex worlds.
So it's complicated is your equivalent of our it depends?
Absolutely. I think, we're on the same page. Yeah. Now, I don't know if it's ever going to happen that I'm going to learn enough about IT to satisfy Sarah's belief that I truly understand what an API is. She's more likely to get my stuff than I am. So we were different tribes at school.
Is that true though, or is that just your impression because you know what you know so well? I do agree though, it is impossible to have the breadth of knowledge and the depth of knowledge. You do have to understand that it's, you might have 2 feet in the same camp, but actually there's parts where you cross over and there's other parts where it's totally okay to not have that depth of experience, right?
Right, well, so that's a good place to finish up. We talk about common ground. That's how would you describe what we can do? What are the good things we can do, apart from having a much improved version of Super Mario?
Super Mario.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's 3 things that people love to do. People love to build things that are used. So they hate to build things that are not used. So to add value. People love to measure progress. So not only what the outcome is, but what are the signals and the gauges that we can measure along the way to show that we're making progress? When do we know how we need to pivot? How are the decisions we need to make? And everyone loves to serve the customer at the end of the day. Everyone loves to get a good result at the end of the day. So from my perspective, there are the 3 key things to continue this journey.
Well, luckily I have 3 as well. I'm going to revert back to Edgar Schein because I've never invented anything as a social scientist. And so there are 3 human factors at play in you and your team as a leader or a team member, in your organisation as a member of a sub-tribe or otherwise. And this is culture. The definition of culture is basically beliefs, values and artefacts. Now, the artifacts are the things we see every day, and it's the whiteboards and the tools and the code and those kind of things. But that's probably not the thing to leverage to go forward. Now, it was interesting because you clicked immediately on life as an engineer, which was the more powerful of those beliefs, values, and artifacts for bringing things together. You agreed it wasn't the artifacts either.
No, and does this mean that I, as the technologist in the room, get the last say? Do I one-up you guys and I get the last say here? Because I think fundamentally, at the end of the day, it is about coming together. We are all serving the same purpose, but making sure that we know what the purpose is, and that we can start by not tackling the artifacts, but really looking at the beliefs and making sure that we've got the same beliefs, and then working from that from a position where we can learn together, we can learn how to speak each other's language, how we can start pulling together as a one body rather than working in our siloed, separate and sometimes fighty tribes.
Yeah, be the molecule would be my closing thing. It isn't two against the red common cause. Be that molecule. It's quite a complex. C12H6O, which is alcohol. That's a good molecule to build around. That's the glue that's holding the shit show together, basically, in the 21st century. But yeah, and it's going to be a constant journey.
And you can make that choice yourself, right? Like, there's nothing that needs to happen from today. For you to make that choice, to be that person, to start this conversation, to have that change happen. So no org design, no tech strategy, no business strategy, just that decision to want to be.
Yeah, every time you board the plane, have the psychological safety briefing instead of the putting the thing on and here's the card.
Yeah, so maybe we can do this and we can start getting our Mario and Luigi and Lego and all be happy together.
It's all collaboration.
Yep.
Andy, let's bring Andy back.
Well,
has it
round of
worked?
applause. Yes, that was fantastic. Thank you. So the good news is the live stream worked. It held up the entire time. There were some good comments on the chat, so we've got some questions for you. So you're not going to get away so quickly. The first one is a comment from Sean, but I'll turn it into a question. So I know the talk's about the divide between business and IT, but there's generally more than two parties within an organisation. And generally the problems can occur between business and business or IT and IT. We all care about different parts of the overall purpose of a company, but we don't often have a shared language. So how would you advise, Sean, to create a shared language within the organisation to help with those friction points?
I'm going to look to you because that really is your PhD subject. So.
No PhD here, but lots of passion behind this. And Sean's absolutely right. There are so many different, business is a term that defines so many different bodies that come together, all with their own different language. But I think it's what we talked about earlier, is understanding what the problem is that we're looking to solve, to what outcome. And what are the different steps along the way that actually measure the success of that, to be able to come together and solve for that problem. And I think if we can look at it from that perspective, of course, there's, we talked about frameworks and artifacts and things like that. Having a value articulation model that actually connects the engineering all the way through to that final business outcome. Maybe it's legal and it's risk reduction, or maybe it's something totally different and growth and customer relations oriented, customer retention oriented. But I think no matter what it is, if you start with the problem, the outcome that you're looking to achieve collectively, and continually going back to the language piece, but why is that challenging? And not taking it personally, but actually challenging the approach to get to that final outcome.
Actually, something I was just thinking about, I always love when I get into a team and when we're starting to discuss an issue just as a team, and I know that they've got it and we've nailed this, because what I actually start hearing is technical people, the devs, the technical leaders, actually start arguing for business-related things. And we get the product people actually start arguing in favour of the technical things. Now, in the before days, the developers would have just been sharing the developing problems or advocating for the development, and the product people would have just been advocating for the product. But in these teams that have been able to cross the aisle and talk and collaborate amongst themselves, I actually find stronger advocacy for another camp than the one that they're in.
Yep. And that's so great when when that actually happens. When you see that, when you've been part of that journey, it's so powerful.
Fantastic.
Lean solved it 60 years ago, but nobody wanted to listen in the West, because we all loved Henry Ford, and that was how we scaled our business, was mass production and mass advertising. That you can create large volumes of value in work, policies, or whatever it is you sell, but still focus on value. And the difference was that Toyota and Taiichi Ohno and those the original proponents of Lean believed that the frontline people cared about value. And Ford believed that people should leave their brains in their lockers and just get the piecework done. And that's the opportunity in front of us. I look at culturally within Thoughtworks, for example. I get, in the olden days when we used to travel, you go to China and see a generation of young engineering professionals, for the 99% of it, learning till 7 o'clock at night non-engineering things. Whether that's business analysis skills or wanting to know about business cases, wanting to know about risk and legal stuff. And like, wow, that's a revolution. When your engineers start getting engaged in those topics, and that's effectively how Lean came about, it was people crossing the streams.
Just one last point on that. When we talk about, how to change some of that language, there's a lot of conversation with tech debt, around tech debt at the moment. And one of the things that I try to do is reposition that to, it's a business liability. It's not it is a technical debt, but it's actually a business liability. And same with organisational redesign. It's an organisational liability. Today, moving forward into digital futures, we have legacy organisational structures. How is that a liability to achieving the goals? Similarly with tech debt, what's the technical components that are literally debt sitting on a book just silently? How do we actually address those? How do we resolve those? And having that conversation and understanding what outcomes will be impacted to motivate that investment from CFOs and so on.
And tech people can ask just use their curiosity. So ask a question. Why are we doing this? Are we growing revenue? Are we protecting revenue? Are we reducing costs? Are we avoiding costs? Okay. And that immediately as a conversation starts to elucidate what the purpose of this stuff is and gets you on the road. And from then, it's a conversation, it's a gamble, it's a bet,
Yes, exactly.
And I think if there was one thing we've done a terrible job of expressing as technologists is the gamble we take every time we get that $1.5 million, build the thing, and it might not work.
Yeah. So we don't do this.
It's so embarrassing to say it might not work because, I'll just find someone who will make it work. We'll hire IBM instead. Gee, actually, they're just bullshitting you.
Totally.
One more communication-related question is, how do you describe the sausage factory to the executive leadership team? And how much detail do they actually need?
Sarah does this all the time. I'm going straight to Sarah.
Not just mention the 4 things which people care about the most. Boards, organisations, executive working teams. So I start with what they care about. So we start about the outcomes of business, what we're trying to do, how are we trying to grow our revenue. When I think about putting a technology strategy together that is going to be approved and accepted by the board, I'm thinking about where the business is growing and what they want to do. So, working with wonderful people like Mara, I've learnt, there's only a handful of growth strategies. One of them, which is we keep doing what we're doing. We just increase wallet share. We just increase customer loyalty. Or we might offer new products. So we're going out, we're going to bring new products to market. Or we're going after a new customer base or a new market share. And I don't know, there's another one.
There's a handful.
There's 4, and there's a combination. An organisation's not just going to choose one; it's going to choose all of them. So when I go to talk about technology strategy to boards, I actually start by saying, this is what the business is trying to do. Now, if the business is trying to get there, if they're trying to build a new product suite, if they're going to expand into a new market, this is what the implication on technology is. So you want to go after new loyalty and new personalisation. Well, here is the implication areas on those. Now, when I'm crafting a tech strategy, I usually then go from the implications on technology to a handful of investigation areas that I can spend. So I know that if I need to expand into a new market, internationalisation is going to be there. We're going to have to make sure that our system can support multiple instances. I also know that I've got data sovereignty issues at play. So I need to make sure that wherever we're running our infrastructure, we're going to be secure, be safe, be compliant in a new market. And so I've got a bunch of investigation areas for each of these business areas of growth. So by the time we pull this technology strategy that we want accepted, but not just accepted, actually understood by the board. We start with what the business is trying to do, where it's trying to get, what's the implication on technology, and how technology can actually help drive the future growth of the business. So not just, this is what we need to change, but if we start doing this, here is how technology is going to enable the business to go off in a completely different direction. So the most important thing that I think about when I'm putting something to the board is not just that I'm preparing a technology strategy, I'm preparing one that is accepted and understood by the audience that needs to invest in it and believe in it.
Yeah, that's really important.
I like the sausage metaphor. Because there's ingredients. So I'd steal someone else's work in this area, as social scientists tend to do. So my favourite thing to explain, and I challenge you if you're a technologist to explain this to a non-technologist or ask about this. So there are 4 ingredients in the sausage. And I know you only want one, but the other 3 come whether you want them or not. The first ingredient is features. It's the major flavour of the sausage because that's what you funded. But with every feature, you get defects. I'm sorry, we're human. It is inevitable that will happen. They can't be totally eliminated. You get risks because you did it in a certain way and you cut corners and you maybe time. So there's some risk, special salt in there. And final ingredient, there is always tech debt. You cannot have a sausage without technical debt in it. So you need to learn about how to solve the indigestion you'll face later on from that, but not have too much of it by taking the time to make the sausage well.
And you can actually discuss those up front, right? And decide on how to...
And you can talk about what makes a bad sausage, like practices and just not taking the time to clean up the factory. I love factory metaphors. So I'll shut up now and do one more question, Andy.
Is there any questions from the room? I don't want to hog it. No, you're all too shy.
I'm seeing a few people in the room, Andy, who are known career swappers. So we might have got a very empathetic audience of people who are up with this stuff.
Where do people get started and how do they learn more about these topics that we've discussed today? You've covered a lot of grounds, we've spoken about a lot of stories that are really interesting, but what are some takeaways that we could give people?
So I think the most unlikely ally to emerge in the next period of time in this, and everyone will leave the room when I say it, is human resources. So a much maligned member of our organisation accordingly, but when this comes back to so much about people and organisation and collaboration and removing the friction, there's a role to be played for that. Getting them interested in kind of the social science around, we'd like to take some of the friction out of our organisation and stop wasting money and doing these things. And that's going to be hard. It's probably 1 in 100 HR folk who aren't just policy and cupcakes as a business model. But I think they're critical. I would lean into the psychological safety stuff because literally steal that slide. Those 10 points from Edmondson are it. If you can accept that your organisation is a complex network of things that have unintended consequences occasionally, you do bets and experiments to navigate through it, your success rate's going to go up so high.
And I think especially leaning into those bets, and I'm going to talk about a framework and an artefact that's delivered, and we know that alone won't solve the problem, but it's definitely part of this conversation, which is really understand the 4 lenses that boards care about. So financial, customer, organisational capacity, and processes. No, risks falls under one of those. That's one of the value drivers. So understand the outcomes and then understand the value drivers for each. So it will be different for each organisation, but as soon as you understand the outcomes an organisation is looking to deliver, and you understand the value drivers for each of those, you've already started to create a bit of a language. I did this recently, and it was like, where does risk map in? Then how do we actually take those engineering metrics around cycle time or other things, and how do we actually map those to risk to create bets to actually get to the outcome? And so I think that framework, which we might share post this session, actually really starts to help get much more alignment around what the problem or outcome is that we're looking to achieve, how we might do that.
Yeah, and if that fails, give me a call.
Totally. All that, yes. Give us a call.
A burgeoning industry in Cleveland. Yeah, my favourite story from this, kind of where things get crossed over in time, because let's face it, we're so privileged to work with generally smart, well-intended people. And gee, that makes work quite different and quite challenging in some cases. I worked at a project at a company, you can probably guess, where it was an immense $100 million stakes re-architecting of a platform. And along the way, the conversation started among the engineers about, well, risk. And unbeknownst to them, that we had a business risk team, but gee, they were on 2 levels down, never talked to them. So they decided, well, we need to manage this. So we're going to create a matrix. But it can't just be like 4 quadrants. It really needs 9 quadrants, and about risk and impact, and we'll plot different compromises we've made on the code deployment and where they'll sit. And they honestly thought they'd invented it. Because what happens when smart people are exposed to different thinking is they go straight to the answers. Business risk people came by one day and going, wow, that's cool. Oh, yeah, we invented that. It's a framework for managing the risk around the deployments, and you'll see we've cut down the great minds think alike.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think that's all we have time for today. Can you thank the presenters?
Thank you.
Thank you, audience.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone online as well. If there's anything you learned or want to learn more about this, feel free to reach out. I'm sure the marketing team will be in touch. But thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yes.